Hi y'all, Bria here again with another book club with Briamaine, and this is my third book club. So whoever would like to join in listening to me read Babylon Sisters, we're gonna keep it going. Last time we had a book club, I believe the mom was trying to get her daughter to go off to college after having a heartbreak, and they're based in Atlanta. So last we left off, she was sending her off at the airport supposedly to go to college for 4 years. And she also had recently got into it with her a little bit because she hadn't told her the truth about who her father is. So we're going to continue reading this, guys. If you're interested in this book, let me know, leave a comment, let me know what you think about the chapters that I go over today. But I'm going to get right into book club. Let's go. Oh, wait. How could I forget? Make sure you grab a snack or something to drink. Y'all, this is my snack. Oh my God, it's such a guilty pleasure. Like, at this point, it was between Trolley and Haribo of what is my favorite gummies, because gummies is my favorite candy. I really shouldn't be eating them like that, but Haribo was always like my favorite for the longest time. And I think as I get older, I'm like, Haribo gummies are a little bit like too chewy, and I like Trolley because they're like kind of soft. They kind of melt in your mouth a little bit. But anyway, I got completely off track. Grab you a snack, get you something to drink. I don't know if you're driving or if you're at home, but I'm just going to get into reading these chapters. And if I stumble on my words, I apologize. All right, y'all. So we are on chapter 8, page 43. And something interesting about this book is that the chapters are very small. Like, some of them are like 3 pages or 2 pages. I feel like they just get to the point of what the chapter is about and then just move on, which is kind of refreshing. But it's also like, ooh, I want to read like a few more chapters because I don't want to just read 1 or 2 chapters for you guys and it's like 5 pages. So we're going to do chapters 8 through 11, and it's around 20 pages, but I read pretty fast. So let's go. When I pulled up in front of Mandeville Maid Services per Sam's instructions, at just before noon, a young woman in dark blue pants and a white shirt with valet stitched above the left breast pocket took my keys, handed me a ticket, and directed me inside. I was wearing my corporate clothes, gray suit, white blouse, black pumps. If there was a job to be had, I intended to leave here with it. When I identified myself to the female security guard, she told me politely that Miss Mandeville's office was on the 5th floor and pointed me to the elevator on the far side of a bright, plant-filled atrium that ran from the hardwood floor of the lobby to the stained glass windows in the ceiling. A small sign pointed to a clinic on the building's lower level, and another arrow directed visitors to the office of the social services coordinator with the question and answer. Got a problem? We've got an answer. So right now, the mom, she's basically going on her business interview. She doesn't really know what the job is. They kind of just had like some vague proposition to work with her, and she's open to taking it because her main goal is to make sure she has enough money to get her daughter through 4 years of college. Let's keep going. Isola's inclusion of a well-woman clinic on site had garnered a flurry of news coverage, all well-deserved. The job she was filling rarely included health benefits, although healthy employees are always better for business. So Isola hired 2 women doctors and gave any woman she placed access to the clinic as long as she was employed. She hadn't been generous enough to spring for hospitalization or maternity benefits, but she was definitely on the right track. The lobby floors were spotless, and the plants were so green I couldn't believe they were real until I got closer and saw a young woman watering and pruning nearby. It was an impressive setup, and it seemed to be humming right along just fine. What could they possibly want with me? Before I had a chance to speculate further, the elevator's mirrored doors opened, and a short, bald man in a beautiful pinstripe suit was standing there smiling like he was so happy to see me he could barely contain the joy. "Miss Sanderson," he said, coming forward and holding out his hand in greeting. "It is a pleasure. I'm Sam Hall." The voice was the one I had heard on the phone, all right, but none of my mental speculation had led me to the picture Sam as a short, slightly round, clean-shaven guy with a very expensive suit and a very firm handshake. "Welcome to Mandeville Maid Services," he said. "You just passed your first test." "And what test was that?" "You arrived on time," he said. "You'd be amazed at how many people are careless about it. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. It adds up, and that's not how we do business." This woman must be a real terror. "The renovation is lovely," I said. "Thank you. Now will you follow me? Miss Mandeville is really looking forward to talking with you." He led me down a short, heavily carpeted hallway that ended at two oversized oak doors. He knocked softly, and a buzzer deactivated the lock with a click. Her level of security surprised me, but I guess it shouldn't have. These are dangerous times. Sam pushed open one of the big doors and moved aside to let me pass. I stepped into a large, very formal-looking room that had an imposing cherrywood desk at the end, and at the other a dining table elaborately set for two that could easily seat six. In between was an area made for more casual conversation, with two love seats facing each other, a couple of wingback chairs, and an oversized throne-looking thing that sprayed antique gold and upholstered with tufted red velvet. It looked like a child's idea of a chair fit for a queen, and Isola Mandeville was sitting in it as I stepped into her office. Woo! So basically, she's going to meet with Boss Lady. She's going to find out what this job proposition is. And right now, she's just super impressed with the quality of the office building and how well kept it is and how professional it looks. She stood up and smiled pleasantly, although she didn't come forward to greet us. Sam closed the door and walked with me over to where she was standing. She looked as intimidating as her photographs, maybe more so. Fierce might be a better word to describe her. She probably wasn't much taller than I was, but it wasn't about height. There was a real presence, an almost palpable strength, rolling off her in waves. I couldn't imagine trying to tell her no. As she stood there majestically in front of her unapologetic throne, I was aware of her strong arms and hands that ended in short, thick fingers and nails shaped square for efficiency, not fashion. She was rangy, but not thin. Her broad, dark brown face was clean of makeup and dominated by her small but expressive eyes and high, sharp cheekbones. Her mouth was full-lipped and firm, and her hair was twisted into a bun, pinned tightly at the back of her head. A plain dark blue linen dress, with a single strand of pearls and a pair of low-heeled pumps, completed her outfit by doing nothing to draw attention to themselves. When you saw Isola Mandeville, you remembered her, not for her clothes. "Miss Mandeville," Sam said, "I would like to present Miss Catherine Sanderson." "Thank you for coming," Isola said, shaking my hand with a grip as firm as Sam's, although her voice was surprisingly light, almost girlish. Neither one of them looked at all the way they sounded. It was like meeting a popular radio DJ and realizing that he was a lot closer in appearance to Biz Markie than Wesley Snipes. "It's an honor to meet you," I said. "I'm a great admirer of your work." "I'm so happy to hear it. That'll make my job that much easier. Please sit down." She indicated the chair closest to the throne, and I took it. It wasn't until I sat down that I realized how much lower my chair was than Isola's. She was giving Sam instructions in the crisp way of someone who is used to saying things one time and one time only. Sam was watching her and nodding attentively. I decided he wasn't really unattractive. It was just that, based strictly on his voice, I had been expecting someone else. In my mind, Sam Hall was a cross between Denzel Washington and Sam Jackson. When he turned out not to be anything like either of them, I felt like he had cheated. He assured Isola that he would communicate her wishes to the kitchen and then turn back to me. "So good to have you here, Miss Sanderson," he said, extending his hand. "I look forward to seeing you again." I had assumed he would be staying for the meeting, but he was gone before I had a chance to say goodbye, pulling the big door closed behind him. Isola Mandeville turned to me in my little sawed-off chair with a question. "You eat meat, don't you?" "Yes," I said, wondering if that was another test. "Good, good." She lowered herself onto her throne as she nodded her approval. "I guess I passed again. I've had some people up here recently who acted like I was putting their lives in danger by serving up a nice porterhouse steak. Asked me hadn't I heard about mad cow disease." She rolled her eyes in disgust. "What kind of question is that? Of course I know about mad cow disease. I remember when Oprah got tried for even talking about mad cow disease. But what does that have to do with a nice lunch of steak and potatoes? Nothing." I had to agree with her on that one. Mad cow disease was so far down on my worry list that I rarely considered it at all. When I want to freak myself out about an illness, I just look at the AIDS statistics and that's enough for me. But this woman didn't invite me up here to talk about cows. We were here to talk turkey. Here's the way I like to do business, she said. We talk first and eat after. That way we can both enjoy the meal without trying to figure out what the other one's thinking. I'm a busy woman. I know you are too. We could waste a lot of time trying to be mind readers. That sounds good to me, I said. Sam didn't really tell me very much when we talked on the phone. She smiled and nodded, as though that were as it should be. Whew! She's still talking to the boss lady, and still we don't know what is the job proposition, but you could tell that this lady is like no nonsense, like about her business, and she goes about it in a very specific way. So let's see. He's very high on you. I need to be able to tap into the community of women, like the back of your hand, and Sam says you can make that happen. I'm flattered, I said. Don't be, she said. I want to help women stand on their own 2 feet, Miss Sanderson, but I'm not in the missionary business. I intend to make a profit and I intend to make this business grow, but there's one thing standing in my way. Do you know what that something is? I shook my head. Sorry, black bitches, she said, as easily as she might have said, would you care for a cup of tea? Well, I was not expecting that. Hopefully, you two don't get mad at me for that one, but they probably don't care anyway. Okay, so we're seeing that boss lady may have some type of feelings towards sorry. Let's keep going. Excuse me? Let me tell you what I mean. I'm in the maid business. If you don't want to clean it up, I can send you a woman who will. It's hard work, but it's steady. There's no shame in it. And it pays enough to keep a roof over your head and clothes on your back. But I got more jobs than I can fill. Why? Because no black woman wants to be a maid anymore. Nobody wants to clean up after everybody's gone home or change 100 beds a day or scrub the toilets out. These girls will do it for a week, a month, maybe 3 months if they really need the money, and then they disappear. They don't quit. They don't call in. They just don't show up one day. So the job gets half done or not done at all. Then the white man who hired me to get it done right calls to say he's not paying for the mess he got, and what am I going to do about it? Okay, we're starting to see. So this woman, Miss Mandeville, she runs a maid service, and what her complaint is that she can't get black women to kind of stay on the job. They tend to come for a short time and then leave and kind of not really give any notice. That's what I'm getting from this right now. I understood exactly what she's talking about, but her characterization of these women as sorry, black, however shaky their work habits might be, didn't sit well with me, and I couldn't let it stand. I don't think calling them itches helps the situation. It doesn't, she said. Nothing does. I've tried everything. They think they're too good for this work. That's why I call them sorry. They don't see the value of an honest living. Why do you call them itches? She let the question sit there for a minute. To see if you're paying attention, she finally said, and to see whether or not you'd agree with me. I always pay attention, I said, and I never call women itches. I don't care how sorry they are. She just looked at me and I looked right back. I wasn't working for her yet, so I had nothing to lose. Good, she said. I don't either. I hate that word. She got up slowly and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window that let her gaze out at her employees going about their assignments. She turned back to me. Can I tell you a story? Certainly, I said, wondering how many more tests I'd have to pass before she fed me. Most people, Isola said slowly, have heard the story of how I once got fired for organizing maids. I nodded. What they haven't heard is why I started doing it. All the stories focused on the shorter hours, higher pay, more humane treatment, classic labor movement goals seem pretty clear to me. I don't mean the obvious reasons. In spite of her earlier statement about not having time to read my mind, Isola was doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, why would I, a poor colored woman working as a buckhead maid, suddenly think about doing something like that? What made me do it? The history of black female activism is littered with tired feet, sore backs, one too many demands from the mistress or master of the house, one too many off days canceled at the last minute. One too many boxes of old clothes instead of a raise in pay. It was a book, she said, and her tone was almost reverent. One book that changed everything for me. And do you know what book that was? I shook my head. I couldn't imagine. It was Native Son by Richard Wright. My surprise was total. Wright's tragic novel from 1940 chronicles the fate of Bigger Thomas, a hapless black kid born into the most wretched poverty who accidentally smothers the drunken daughter of his wealthy white employers and then, in a panic, burns her body in the furnace. His arrest and conviction became a cause célèbre, galvanizing or polarizing the book's white characters, depending on their political persuasions. I don't understand, I said, honestly confused by what she had found in the grim pages of the novel that sparked her own activism. You've read the book? I nodded. In college. You remember it? Pretty well. Well enough to answer a question for me? Isola needed to change her name to SAT. I'll do my best, I said. It's been a while. It's an easy question, she said. Why did Bigger kill that woman? If you remember the book at all, you remember that. He was afraid of being discovered in a white girl's bedroom, I said, trying to remember the character's name. Mary, said Isola, still effortlessly reading my mind. Yes, Mary. She was drunk and he had carried her upstairs. The scene came back to me piece by piece. Mary's drunken staggering, Bigger's rising panic. He was afraid of being discovered. But why did you assume I was talking about Mary? Slowly, another scene swirled out of my memory, but dimly. Not nearly as clear as Mary's death scene. There was a woman in this one, too. But who was she? What was her name? There was another woman, I said, wishing I could call up more details, but try as I might, she remained a mystery. Bessie, Isola said softly. That other woman's name was Bessie, and she was a colored woman, just like us, who helped Bigger out of the goodness of her heart and got bashed in the head for her trouble. Now I remembered. After he killed Bessie for no reason except misdirected rage, the hero added insult to injury by stuffing her body down an air shaft, rendering her invisible. Isola's point was beginning to dawn on me. Okay, so they're having a conversation about another book, um, Native Son by Richard Wright. And I guess she has some point to make about why in this book, I guess the main character, commits murder. I didn't know it was going to get this deep, y'all. I thought she was just going for a job interview. This is crazy. So let's see where they go with this whole, I guess, juxtaposition with this Native Son book. All right. That white woman I worked for had that book in her library for some reason. Maybe one of her kids brought it home from college. I don't know. She didn't have any other black books I ever saw, but she had that one. And one day it was out on the table. And before I dusted it off and put it back up where it belonged, I opened it up and read a little of the first page. I had never read a book written by a Negro before. I knew there were some, but I quit school after the 10th grade, so I never actually saw one. But that Native Son book just grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let go. I sat right there all afternoon and read almost that whole book. When it was time to go, I put it in my purse and I read it all the way home on the bus, ate my dinner, and kept reading until I was done. That next morning, I couldn't get Bigger and Bessie out of my head. I understood about Mary, him being so scared and all, but why had he killed Bessie? I took the book back, and after I gave her breakfast, I asked Mrs. Wyndham, that was her name, if she read it. She said she had, and I said then maybe she could help me understand why Bigger killed that woman. She always liked to think that she was helping me improve my mind, so she gave me this long explanation about how dangerous it would be for a black man to be in Mary's bedroom, like I didn't know that. And on until I realized she wasn't thinking about Bessie at all. That poor colored woman never crossed Mrs. Wyndham's mind. I was fascinated with Isola's line of reasoning and sorry that my first reaction had been the same as the clueless Buckhead matron's. It reminded me of traveling with my parents to one small Caribbean island or another when I was just a kid, newly alive with a passion to land or another when I newly alive with a passion to right the world's wrongs and full of a reformer's zeal. I was amazed and ashamed at how they could ignore the poor people who were always around the fringes of the tourist zones we frequented, looking for a chance to sell you something or begging a coin. Even the people who were working at the hotels were invisible to my mother and father as they dressed in their beautiful clothes, kissed me goodnight after telling the babysitter what time to put me to bed, and swept out the gangster-owned casinos for a night of high stakes gambling that would probably have financed the babysitter's family for a year or two. It made me feel guilty that we had so much while other people had so little. And one night, as my father was putting on his white dinner jacket, I asked him if it didn't make him feel bad to ignore them. They're not my responsibility, he said, shrugging them off like a cheap suit, and they're certainly not yours. Why don't you go down to the pool and leave the people's revolution to the people? After that, I stayed home in Atlanta when they traveled outside the country. Neither one of them pressed me for the real reason why. I think they were relieved not to have to drag me along, trailing my privileged American guilt behind me like a whiff of jungle gardenia. That white woman didn't see me or Bessie, Isola was saying, and it made me mad. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. No wonder these women worked their maids so hard. They never even saw us. By the time I got off work that day and walked that long uphill stretch from Miss Wyndham's house to the bus stop, I had decided one thing. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I was a full grown woman, and I figured it was time to start acting like one. I owed it to myself, and I owed it to Bessie. Okay, so now we kind of get an understanding of why she is, talking about this book that she read. It actually had a lot of effect on her and why she carries herself the way that she does now, why she kind of started an empire made business to help other Black women. But now she's having this issue with them not wanting to work in that industry. She came back and sat down across from me. I'm sure she told that story a lot, but it moved me. I forgave her for the black bitches test question and waited for her to wrap it up. And that, she said, is what all this is about. Bearing witness for Bessie by looking out for all the hardworking colored women people never even see. That's why I do what I do. And if you decide to come and work for me, that's what you'll be doing too. It was easily the most intense job interview I'd ever had, if that's what this was, and it was impossible to resist. My work was already about saving women. Of course, I wanted to bear witness for Bessie. I was already doing it. For Maria and Ashima and Migdalia and Shaniqua, it was the same testimony, and I had already been sworn. But that's what you're already doing, isn't it? She said, watching me closely. She was good at this, and she knew it. Now she was ready to close the deal. Yes, I guess it is, I said. What can I do to help you? As if on cue, there was a soft tap at the door. Isola pushed the buzzer to admit a white jacketed waiter bringing our food in covered silver dishes like room service. Now that, she said, standing up and waving him in to set things up, we can't talk about over lunch, which was exactly what we did. All right, y'all, that was chapter 8. So we learned a lot in chapter 8 about this job interview, job opportunity, and it looks like it has everything to do with empowering Black women. So I think she's going to take the opportunity, I would imagine, so that she can help support her daughter through college. So let's move on to chapter 9. This is page 52. By the time I left Isola Mandeville's office, we had hammered out the broad outlines of a relationship that seemed mutually beneficial, and my job search was over before it got started. She was interested in targeting immigrant and refugee women to offer her services, and she needed my help to reach them effectively. It was a great idea. Many of these women needed immediate temporary work to help support their families, and they were motivated to work hard by the dreams that had brought them to America in the first place. I was happy to make the hookup. If they're going to be doing service work, Isola's operation would be more protection than they were going to find anywhere else, decent wages, and even a few benefits. It seemed like a winning combination all the way around. Plus, the money she was offering was enough to cover all of Phoebe's college costs and let me put a little aside for myself. The only problem was I had a company. So I made a counteroffer that allowed me to start working for her freelance while I finished my current projects. She reluctantly agreed, and I promised I'd be on board full time in 3 months. How I was going to get it all done was something I'd have to figure out later, but for now we shook hands to seal the deal and enjoyed our coffee with a slice of sweet potato pie. Outside, I gave my ticket to the young woman at the valet stand who stamped it paid and called for my car to be brought around front. As I stood there waiting, I could hear the radio she had playing quietly beside her. She was listening to Black Talk Radio, something I almost never do since I can be ignorant all by myself. An indignant woman was urging the show's listeners to support the first Black American Idol winner because she thought he wasn't getting as much airplay and publicity as the white runner-up had gotten, including being featured solo on the cover of Rolling Stone, a magazine this woman had probably never read in her life. Buy his CD on day one. She was urging all those within the sound of her voice. These white folks need to be taught a lesson once and for all. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Sometimes these Atlanta Negroes drive me crazy. All they ever talk about is race. Not race in the sense of the human family, not race in the sense of the complexities of living in the global village with its awe inspiring displays of cultural diversity. Those discussions would be interesting, certainly challenging, and might even result in some concrete changes in lifestyle or public policy. But no, in Atlanta, racial discussions continue along the lines established all those years ago when former Governor Lester Maddox was at his segregated restaurant handing out pick handles to keep the pickwick. Hold on, y'all. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me go back a little bit. Former Governor Lester Maddox was at his segregated restaurant handing out pick handles to keep the Pickwick, the bastion of white supremacy and bad food it had always been. Black folks on one side trying to get in, white folks on the other side trying to keep us out. It's such a simplistic, counterproductive way of looking at things, especially when all the people in charge around here are black. We're still bitching like the last 20 years never happened at all. It's exhausting. Sometimes Louis accuses me of being an elitist, but I'm not. I just wish we had a bigger worldview, that's all. The fact that Brother Reuben, as she kept calling him, garnered a big record contract, earned the love of legions of fans, appeared on countless magazine covers and TV shows, and received a Grammy nomination meant nothing to the woman who was calling. In her mind, he was black, and therefore a victim in need of the protection that only racial solidarity can afford. What do you think about what she said? I asked the young woman in the booth. She glanced up at me quickly to see if she could be candid and then shrugged her shoulders. If you're asking me, it seems like she's making it into a sympathy thing. You know, buy the brother's CD to help him out. But he don't need that. He can really sing. You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. The host apparently did too. Y'all ain't gotta do Brother Reuben no favors though, he said. Check him out. The voice belonging to the brother in question was one of those full, rich, chocolate voices that only comes out the mouths of black men. Jerry Butler has one. Isaac Hayes has one. The Temptations have 5 between them, and Barry White had at least 2 all by himself. Reuben Studdard wasn't in their league yet, but he was working on it, and the boy definitely had promise. Sort of like Atlanta, I thought as my car pulled up to the curb and the young valet hopped out, accepted my tip, and closed the door behind me. Big and corny and full of passionate potential that it never quite fulfills. But just when you think you know everything there is to know about the place, it turns the note you expected to hear in a direction you had never considered, and you find yourself heading home with all the windows rolled down, singing your ass off, and being eternally grateful for even the possibility of perfection. Hmm. Okay, guys, so that was chapter 9. And it's interesting. She's giving her perspective about living in Atlanta, which, has a lot of black people here, a lot of black people in government, and her seeing that a lot of people still have a lot of racial tension. And maybe she feels that a lot of people feel victimized, whereas she feels kind of grateful for the opportunity to even live in a city like this. So that's interesting. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments, especially if you're from Atlanta or have ever been here. I know for me coming here, whenever I come to the airport, Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson, it's just so interesting to see all the beautiful pictures of like black people on the walls and stuff. It's just something you don't really see flying around to other states. And so you really just know like when you get here, it's like a black city, So I guess what she's saying is she doesn't understand why so many people are complaining when there's so much success around, I guess you would say. But some people think that she's an elitist, so who knows? Let's move on to chapter 10. The problem when your two best friends become a couple is that they're never around when you're up for a spontaneous celebration. They're always at lunch or on their way to the movies or strolling in the park or simply not answering their phones because they've got better things to do. Although I was dying to share my good news, Amelia and Louis were nowhere to be found. When I got home and called her office, Amelia's secretary said she'd left early, and the answering machine was on at the newspaper even though it wasn't even 4 o'clock. This was serious. Lewis always wrote his weekly columns on Monday, since the paper was in production on Tuesday to hit the stands on Wednesday. But today he had not only left early, but closed the office. Amelia and Lewis have been friends since I introduced them, but 4 months ago she took him to a Sweet Honey in the Rock concert at Spelman, and ever since they had been thick as thieves. They were still being cool around me, but I could feel a new energy between them. I used to try to tease Lewis that he had printer's ink for blood, but he took it as a compliment. The Sentinel was his life. He was the owner, editor, and publisher. It was the only job he ever had. Starting as a delivery boy when he was just a kid, his father, Lewis Adams Sr., had founded the Sentinel in 1964 and raised his son to believe that their mission, to tell the truth to the people, was worth the sacrifices they had to make as a family to get it into the hands of its readers. In the early days, the paper was often under attack by the Ku Klux Klan for encouraging black voter registration. The office was firebombed twice, and Lewis told me he had answered the phone at their house many times as a child to hear a snarling male voice threatening his father's life or his mother's safety. But those were the glory days. The staff had dwindled to Lewis, his longtime receptionist, Miss Iona Williams, a couple of interns from the AU Center, and two freelance reporters who covered everything from church news to City Hall, and none of it very well. The only reason to pick up the paper at all was to read Lewis's blistering editorials. He was as passionate about politics as his father had been, and as well informed. He had contacts all over the place who fed him information, so his columns, which he ran in large type on the front page and a move right out of Citizen Kane, were full of unexpected tidbits that made them required reading for anybody who wanted to traverse the labyrinth that is our local political scene. The Sentinel was a losing proposition economically, but for Lewis it was both a legacy and a labor of love. Imagining Lewis without the Sentinel was like imagining Lewis without his lopsided grin. Impossible. So a group celebration was out, but I was still full of nervous energy from my meeting with Isola, and I didn't feel like getting right back to work. Outside, the sky was as unbroken expanse of blue, and the breeze was blowing cool air from the North Georgia mountains. I opened the back door and stepped outside, as if to banish any lingering doubts that this was a perfect day. An impossibly red-breasted robin was singing itself silly in the middle of my sunflowers. That's when I decided to take Amelia up on her standing invitation of a swim. I'd have the pool to myself, just me and that mermaid and all that sunshine. Maybe it was time for a little reward after surviving my recent trials by fire. We're always quick to fuss at ourselves when we do it wrong. I want to reward myself when I do it right. My daughter isn't mad at me anymore, and my best friends are falling in love before my eyes. Maybe it was standing my ground with Phoebe, or maybe it was being in the room with Isola's strange energy and Bessie's ghost, or maybe even something in Sam Hawes' shiny bald head. But I felt like I could go Amelia's 50 laps and 50 more without even breathing hard. Which is, of course, the real test. Not just can you do it, but can you make it look so easy everybody thinks they can do it too, until they try it and come up winded, gasping for air and hoping nobody's watching. That's not me. I've worked hard to get here and I'm ready for my close-up. Been ready. Why do you think I bought a new bathing suit? Just in case. Okay, that was chapter 10. And in this chapter, we can see that she's very excited about the opportunity that's been presented to her by Isola. And unfortunately, she's not able to really share this excitement with anyone at the moment because her best friend, Louie, who works at the newspaper, and her other, I think Amelia is her neighbor, but also a close friend, they're like dating or something. So nobody's really around for her to share this information with, but she takes it upon herself to swim some laps in her neighbor's pool and just kind of celebrate on her own and kind of like big herself up, like, yeah, I don't give up, I'm gonna go hard, like, because she's gonna be doing this job opportunity as well as managing her own business at the same time. So let's move on to chapter 11 and see what happens. And this is our last chapter in this book club, episode 3. But I'm enjoying it right now. It's a lot. It's giving history of Atlanta, which is where I am. It's giving, I don't know, it's just giving black, and I love that. I love that for me. So I'm just going to keep reading, y'all. Last chapter, 11. The next week flew by in a blur of closing out old files, creating new ones, and reading through the mountain of material Sam had sent over to familiarize me with their Mandeville maids. He was in Miami on business all week, which was fine with me. By the time he got back, I'd have some ideas ready for him to review. Lewis and Amelia had congratulated me on my new client and on surviving Phoebe's last visit. I had teased them about their whereabouts when I tried to share my good news. They looked properly sheepish, and their answers were evasive enough to confirm my suspicions. I wonder if Phoebe had noticed it too. I'd have to remember to ask her next time we talked. The house had returned to its pre Phoebe state of calm, and I was getting loads of work done, but the truth was, at the end of the day, I really missed her. Our closeness was partly a result of my raising her alone, but more because we enjoyed each other's company like good friends do. When she first went to Fairfield 2 years ago, I was a wreck. She wanted to go. It was her idea, so I wasn't worried about her making the adjustment. What threw me was how quiet the house was. I was so used to her music, her voice, her friends, her radio, her computer, her television shows, her favorite DVDs, her guitar, that when she left, the silence was almost overwhelming. For some reason, I started listening to a lot of opera, Puccini especially, since he's the one my mother liked, and these were her records I was playing, especially Madame Butterfly and La Boheme. All those doomed sopranos and impossibly passionate tenors helped me fill up the house with other voices that didn't remind me that my baby was now off on her own in the world, growing up and having adventures while I was just rattling around in a big empty house. For the first time in a long time, I was lonely. Sure, I had my friends and my work, but there I was, still relatively young, still reasonably attractive, all dressed up with no place to go. I had had only two lovers, if you can even call them that, since Phoebe's father left for Africa. They were nice enough guys, and I wasn't looking for mad love as much as a friend I could sometimes sleep with. I thought it would be easy, but once you get out of school, it's much harder to meet single men. The ones I did meet never seemed to have it all together in one place. The ones I liked to talk to were already married or didn't appeal to me sexually. The ones who appealed to me sexually usually had no interest in the things I cared about. Only twice did I think I had found somebody interesting, but neither one worked out. In both cases, the sex was terrible. One guy was so inept that reaching him would have required more effort than I was prepared to put in, and the other one had seen one too many porno movies and firmly believed that the best position in which to have sex was doggy style. No matter how many times I assured him this was a male fantasy, not a female preference. No, not her over here clocking tea, that's crazy. Okay. After those disasters, I tried a couple of vibrators, but they made me feel pathetic. Sex in the City notwithstanding, and I didn't want to explain what they were to Phoebe since I knew she would find them sooner or later. She's gone through my drawers and closets since she was a kid, just like I used to search through my mother's things looking for clues to who she really was, trying to crack that mysterious code. So I got rid of the machinery and made sure to masturbate on natural at least a couple of times a month to keep everything in working order, but that was pretty much it. That was still pretty much it. I don't think about sex much when Phoebe's home. I think my material instinct keeps my libido at bay, or my maternal instinct keeps my libido at bay. But lately, when she leaves, I can't help it. Amelia says 35 to 45 is a period of intense sexual energy for women because we are facing the end of our childbearing years. And the urge to express all we are and know sexually is overwhelming. Her word, not mine. Well, I'm 38 and it wasn't that bad yet, but the devil does find work for idle hands. So I put on my mom's scratchy old album of Leontine, Leontine Price singing Madame Butterfly and went to get the mail. I was delighted to find a letter from Phoebe sitting on top of the stack. Email had encroached on our letter writing, but we still managed to sneak in a real letter on real stationery with real stamps every now and it was always a treat. I dropped the rest of the mail on the coffee table and carried Phoebe's letter over to the couch so I could curl up and savor it. I tucked up my bare feet, unfolded the pages that smelled vaguely of my daughter's scent, and read these words. Dear Mom, I know you won't like what I have to say, but you know I would never do something like this if it weren't really important to me. I have a right to know my father. She underlined my father in red like I might miss it. You have made a decision not to tell me what I want to know, and I respect that. But now I'm asking you to respect the decision I have made. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. What was this girl talking about? I have taken your college diaries back to school with me. I've only taken the ones that would fit the time period when I might have been conceived. I made a list of possible candidates, your lovers. She underlined that too, just to make sure I was paying attention. And I've sent them all a letter outlining my situation and requesting that they have a DNA test and forward the results to me with a copy to you. She's got to be kidding me. She has to be. I know you're probably mad at me now, but I had to do what was best for me and not let you talk me out of it. Please don't try to contact me. I've moved off campus with 2 girlfriends and I've changed my cell number. I just don't think I can talk to you again until you can tell me the truth about my father. It's just too painful. Please don't hate me, Mom. This is my life we're talking about, not yours. If you need to reach me in an emergency, Lewis will be able to find me, but only in an emergency. A final red streak under that for emphasis, and then the usual sign off. Love you, Mom. Phoebe. Ooh. And that is a wrap for chapters 8 through 11 on Babylon Sisters, y'all. This was a great read right now. Like, I am definitely invested. I slick want to just keep going to find out what happens, but we saw this coming, didn't we? We saw this coming. We talked about this in chapters 1 through 3, where I'm like, do you think it's okay for a parent to deny their child the right to the other parent, or at least to know that other parent, and how it may backfire? But I kind of saw this coming, and I'm not really that surprised, to be honest with you. But let's chat about it in the comments section, y'all. Let me know if you're interested in this book and what we've been chatting about. Tell me if anything stuck out to you from what was mentioned in these past chapters. Let me know if you or someone you know has been denied access to one of their parents at some point in their life, or just in general. And yeah, let's get the conversation going, you guys. Until the next book club, this was fun. I love y'all, and make sure you check out Babylon Sisters by Pearl Cleage. Peace. We're done. We're done. We're done.